The harsh winter wind howled through Valentine, Montana, as Olivia Kane stared at the empty space beside her in bed, the pillow still bearing the imprint of her husband's head. She hadn't heard his footsteps leave in the night, hadn't felt him pack the trunk that was now missing from their bedroom. All that remained was a folded note on the dresser, its cruel words still burning in her mind. "I need a real wife, one who can give me sons." 5 years of marriage ended with a hastily scribbled note. Olivia pressed her palm against her flat stomach, the same stomach that had betrayed her time and again. 3 lost babies, 3 tiny graves in the cemetery at the edge of town, 3 failures that had hollowed her out and now cost her the man she had once believed would love her through anything. Valentine had never felt colder than it did the February morning of 1878. The mining town nestled in Montana's eastern valleys had been her home since she was 16, when her parents moved west, seeking better fortunes. Now, at 24, Olivia found herself truly alone for the first time. The doctor's words from last summer echoed in her mind as she dressed for the day. "Mrs. Kane, I'm afraid there's scarring. The fever's damaged. It's unlikely you'll ever carry to term." She had wept for days while Harold, her husband, grew increasingly distant. His betrayal shouldn't have surprised her, yet it cut deeper than any physical pain she'd ever endured. Olivia's hands shook as she pinned her chestnut hair into a practical bun. The general store wouldn't run itself. Harold might have abandoned their marriage, but she still had the business they had built together. It was the only thing she had left. Valentine was a small enough town that news traveled faster than the winter wind. By mid-morning, sympathetic glances followed her everywhere. Mrs. Peterson pressed her hand wordlessly as she purchased flour. Mr. Jenkins awkwardly avoided eye contact while buying tobacco. Even the children seemed to know. Their usual chatter hushed when they came in for penny candy. "Just say it," Olivia finally snapped at Evelyn Miller, the banker's wife who had been hovering near the fabric bolts for 20 minutes without making a selection. "Everyone knows, so you might as well say it." Evelyn's round face flushed. "I'm so sorry, Olivia. It's just... Harold was seen boarding the eastbound train last night, alone. Yes, well, apparently a barren wife isn't worth keeping." The words tasted like acid on her tongue, but saying them aloud somehow made them more real and, strangely, more bearable. "That's terrible. What will you do with the store?" "Run it," Olivia replied simply. "It's half mine." Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. "But legally, I have a signed partnership agreement. Harold might have forgotten that when he left, but I haven't." It was one small mercy that Harold had agreed to put the business in both their names when they opened 3 years ago. Her father, a cautious man, had insisted on it before providing part of their starting funds. The bell over the door jangled, and both women turned to see Sheriff Tate walk in, his weathered face grim beneath his silver mustache. "Mrs. Kane, might I have a word?" Olivia's heart sank. Whatever this was, it couldn't be good news. "Excuse me, Mrs. Miller, the calico you were looking at is on sale this week." She followed the sheriff to a quiet corner of the store. "What is it, Sheriff?" "Madam, I received a telegraph from Billings this morning. Your husband withdrew all funds from your bank account there yesterday afternoon." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "All of it? But that's nearly all our savings." "I'm afraid so. Mr. Jenkins at our bank says Harold didn't touch your local account. But that was just the store's operating funds, wasn't it?" Olivia nodded numbly. "Just enough to restock inventory and pay the monthly expenses." Sheriff Tate removed his hat, twisting it in his hands. "I'm mighty sorry, Olivia. If there's anything I can do..." "Thank you, Sheriff." Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, hollow and distant. "If you'll excuse me, I have customers." The rest of the day passed in a blur. Olivia moved like a sleepwalker, wrapping packages, counting change, and forcing polite conversation while inside she was screaming. By closing time, exhaustion had settled into her bones like an old friend. She was just locking up when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn. A stranger rode down the main street, his tall frame easy in the saddle. Even in the fading light, she could see the trail dust coating his clothes. A cowboy by the look of him, with broad shoulders and a worn hat pulled low over his eyes. Olivia paid him little mind. Valentine saw plenty of cowboys passing through, especially as winter began to loosen its grip and the cattle drives prepared to start up again. She slipped her key into her pocket and started toward the small apartment above the store, her home now, not theirs. "Excuse me, madam." She turned to find the cowboy had dismounted and was standing a respectful distance away. Up close, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps late 20s, with keen blue eyes and several days' worth of stubble on his jaw. "Store's closed, I'm afraid. We open at 8 tomorrow. Not looking to shop, madam. Looking for work. Heard the Wallace Ranch might be hiring. Old man Wallace's place is 5 miles north of town. Follow the creek path. You can't miss it." He nodded, touching the brim of his hat. "Much obliged. Would there happen to be a room available in town? My horse could use the rest before we head out there." Olivia gestured toward the far end of the street. "The Silver Dollar has rooms. Mrs. Henley keeps them clean, and her rates are fair." "Thank you, Mrs. Kane. Olivia Kane." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps? Had word of her humiliation spread beyond Valentine already? "Ryan Walker," he offered in return. "Just rode in from Wyoming Territory, looking for steady work for the season." "Well, Mr. Walker, Wallace pays better than most, if you don't mind a foreman who believes shouting is the only way to communicate." That earned her a smile, transforming his trail-worn face. "I've worked for worse." As he remounted his horse, Olivia felt a strange sense of loss. This brief, meaningless interaction had been the only moment all day when someone had looked at her without pity. "Mr. Walker," she called impulsively, "the store gets supply wagons on Thursdays. If Wallace doesn't work out, we sometimes need help unloading." He tipped his hat again. "I'll remember that, Mrs. Kane. Good evening to you." Olivia watched him ride toward the Silver Dollar, then climb the stairs to her empty apartment. Only when she was inside, with the door firmly closed, did she allow herself to cry. The next week passed in a daze of work and sleepless nights. Olivia threw herself into the store, taking inventory, rearranging displays, and updating the ledgers with a fervor that left her too exhausted to think. If she worked hard enough, she could almost forget the whispers that followed her through town. Poor thing. Always knew that Harold had big dreams beyond Valentine. Well, what man wants a wife who can't give him children? That last one, overheard as she was picking up mail at the post office, nearly broke her carefully constructed composure. She'd hurried back to the store, locked herself in the storeroom, and sobbed until her throat was raw. By Thursday morning, Olivia had composed herself enough to face the supply wagons. She'd asked the blacksmith's son to help with unloading, but the boy had come down with a fever overnight. When the first wagon arrived shortly after dawn, she steeled herself for a long day of heavy lifting. "Need a hand?" The deep voice startled her. Ryan Walker stood in the doorway, hat in hand, looking considerably cleaner than when she'd last seen him. "Mr. Walker, I thought you'd be up at Wallace's by now. Turns out the position was filled before I arrived. Foreman forgot to tell Wallace to stop spreading word." He shrugged, seemingly unbothered. "I've been doing odd jobs around town while I wait for word of other opportunities." Olivia hesitated. Having help would make the day much easier, but hiring a stranger a man invited more gossip, and she'd had her fill of being the subject of Valentine's wagging tongues. "Mrs. Henley vouches for me," he added, as if reading her thoughts. "I've been helping her with repairs around the boarding house." That decided her. Edith Henley was the most suspicious woman in town. If she trusted Ryan Walker enough to let him work on her property, that was good enough for Olivia. "Very well, Mr. Walker. It's a full day's work unloading and organizing. I can pay 50 cents and provide lunch." "That'll do just fine, Mrs. Kane." As the wagons arrived one by one, Olivia was grateful for Ryan's presence. He worked steadily and efficiently, carrying sacks of flour and sugar that would have taken her multiple trips. By midday, they had unloaded 2 of the 3 expected wagons, and Olivia's back was already protesting. "Let's break for lunch," she suggested, wiping sweat from her brow despite the cool spring air. "I've got stew warming on the stove upstairs." The small apartment felt different, with a man's presence filling the space. Ryan ducked his head entering the low doorway, his tall frame making the room seem smaller than it was. He removed his hat, revealing dark blonde hair in need of a trim, and waited for her invitation before sitting at the table. "Hope Wallace not working out hasn't left you stranded," Olivia said, as she ladled stew into bowls. "I've got enough saved to get by until something turns up. Been working cattle since I was 14. There's always another ranch. Where are you from originally, Mr. Walker? Kansas, originally. Family had a small farm, but it went under during the war. Been on my own since 16. Olivia placed a bowl before him. That's young to be alone in the world. Old enough to work, old enough to make my way. He took a spoonful of stew and nodded appreciatively. This is mighty fine, Mrs. Kane. Thank you. It's my mother's recipe. Olivia hesitated, then asked the question that had been nagging at her. Mr. Walker, when I introduced myself the other day, you had a look of recognition. Have we met before? Ryan set down his spoon, meeting her gaze directly. No, madam, we haven't, but I'd heard your name mentioned at the Silver Dollar, folks talk. Olivia's appetite vanished. I see. For what it's worth, most were saying how well you're handling things, running the store, single-handed and all. And the rest? Ryan's jaw tightened slightly. Don't bear repeating. They ate in silence for a few minutes before Ryan spoke again. My sister couldn't have children either. Her husband stuck by her, though. They ended up taking in orphans from the war, raised 5 of them as their own. The simple statement, offered without judgment or pity, loosened something in Olivia's chest. Your sister was fortunate in her choice of husband. She was. Ryan met her eyes again. A man who leaves when times get hard isn't much of a man at all, if you don't mind my saying so. Harold didn't see it that way. He said it was his right to have sons to carry on his name. Ryan's expression darkened. Then he never deserved you. The words spoken with such conviction by this near stranger brought unexpected tears to Olivia's eyes. She turned quickly to the stove, pretending to check the bread warming there. I apologize, Ryan said quietly. It's not my place to speak ill of your husband. Ex-husband, I suppose, though there's been no formal divorce. Olivia composed herself and returned to the table. And no need to apologize for speaking the truth. I've thought the same myself on my better days. When they returned to work, something had shifted between them, a tentative understanding perhaps, or simply the comfort of having spoken honestly with someone who didn't treat her like she might shatter. The final wagon arrived late, delayed by a broken wheel. By the time they finished unloading, dusk was falling. Olivia counted out Ryan's pay, then hesitated. Mr. Walker, if you're still looking for work, I could use help around here a few days a week. There are repairs I've been putting off, and having someone to help with deliveries would be a relief. Ryan studied her face, his expression unreadable. People might talk. People already talk. At least this way, I'll have a tighter roof over my head while they do it. That earned her another of those transformative smiles. I'd be glad to help, Mrs. Kane. When would you like me to start? Tomorrow at 8? I'll be here. He placed his hat back on his head and moved toward the door, then paused. Mrs. Kane, for what it's worth, I think you're the strongest person I've met in Valentine so far. Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Olivia standing in her store with the strangest feeling that something important had just happened. The next morning, Ryan arrived promptly at 8, carrying a toolbox. Olivia had prepared a list of repairs, loose boards on the porch, a leak in the storeroom roof, shutters that wouldn't close properly. While Valentine's winters were harsh, spring brought its own challenges in the form of sudden, violent thunderstorms that could flood the streets within minutes. I'll start with the roof, Ryan said, after reviewing her list. Storm clouds building to the west. Sure enough, by midday, dark clouds loomed over the mountains. Ryan worked steadily through the morning, patching the roof with materials Olivia had purchased from the lumberyard. The smell of fresh cut wood and the sound of hammering filled the store, oddly comforting, despite their intrusion on the usual quiet. When the first customers arrived, Olivia busied herself with helping them, trying to ignore their curious glances toward the ladder leading to the roof. Mrs. Peterson, always the boldest of Valentine's gossips, didn't bother to hide her interest. New helper? She asked, as Olivia measured out coffee beans. Just hired him for some repairs. The winter was hard on the building. Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose. Handsome fellow. Where's he from? Kansas originally, I believe. Olivia kept her tone deliberately casual. Will there be anything else today? No, that'll do. Mrs. Peterson leaned closer, lowering her voice. Olivia, dear, You know I'm only concerned for your welfare. A young woman alone, appearances matter. Olivia's smile tightened. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Peterson. That'll be 32 cents. By the time the older woman left, Olivia's patience was wearing thin. She knew she'd face this reaction. It was precisely why she'd hesitated to hire Ryan in the first place. A widow hiring male help would barely raise eyebrows. But a woman abandoned by her husband. Valentine would be buzzing with speculation before sundown. Ryan came down from the roof just as thunder rumbled in the distance. Got it patched before the rain. Might want to put a bucket under the far corner just in case, but it should hold. Thank you. Would you like some lunch before tackling the shutters? The bell jangled and Sheriff Tate walked in, his expression grim. Mrs. Kane, Mr. Walker. Ryan nodded respectfully to the lawman. Sheriff, I need a word with Mrs. Kane if you don't mind. I'll check those shutters, Ryan said, excusing himself to the front porch. Once he was out of earshot, Sheriff Tate removed his hat. Olivia, I've had news. Harold's been located in Denver. Olivia's heart stuttered. Is he coming back? No. He's filed divorce papers there, citing abandonment. Abandonment? The absurdity nearly made her laugh. He's the one who left in the night. I know, but he's claiming you refused to accompany him to Denver, where he found work. Says you chose the store over your marriage. Rage and disbelief warred within her. That's a lie. He never mentioned Denver, never asked me to go anywhere with him. He just left. Sheriff Tate sighed. I believe you, Olivia, but without witnesses, it's your word against his, and Colorado's divorce laws. Well, they favor his story. What does this mean for the store? He can't take it, can he? Your partnership agreement should protect your half, at least. I'd suggest wiring your father for help securing a lawyer. Olivia nodded numbly. Thank you for telling me. There's one more thing. The sheriff hesitated. Harold's remarrying, a widow with 2 young sons from her first marriage. The final blow landed like a physical pain. Less than 2 weeks gone, and he'd not only replaced her, but found himself the ready-made family he'd always wanted. I see. Olivia's voice sounded hollow to her own ears. Is there anything else I should know? No, that's all for now. I'm sorry, Olivia. When the sheriff left, Olivia stood motionless behind the counter, struggling to process this new betrayal. She didn't notice Ryan had returned until he spoke. Bad news? She looked up, startled to find him watching her with concern. Harold's in Denver, filing for divorce, claiming I abandoned him. A bitter laugh escaped her. And he's already found himself a new wife with children included. Ryan's expression darkened. Sounds like the kind of man who runs from his problems instead of facing them. That's exactly what he is. The certainty in her voice surprised her. I just didn't see it until now. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering against the newly repaired roof. Olivia listened for leaks, but the repair seemed to be holding. What will you do? Ryan asked quietly. Fight for my store. Wire my father for help. And then... She straightened her shoulders. Then I'll build a life without Harold Kane. Ryan nodded, a look of approval in his blue eyes. Shutters can wait until the rain passes. What else needs doing inside? Grateful for the change of subject, Olivia showed him the shelving that needed reinforcing and the sticky drawer in the counter. They worked side by side through the afternoon, the steady rain keeping customers away and giving Olivia time to think. By evening, when Ryan prepared to leave, she had made a decision. Mr. Walker, I'd like to offer you a job. Not just odd repairs, but regular work. The store needs deliveries made, heavy stock moved, and there's the wagon to maintain. I can pay $8 a week plus room and board if you're interested. Ryan studied her face. Room and board? There's a small room off the storeroom downstairs. It's nothing fancy, but it has a bed and a stove. My late father-in-law used it when he visited. She hurried to add, the arrangement would be completely proper. Separate entrances, and you'd take meals with me only when convenient for store operations. Are you sure, Mrs. Kane? People are already talking. People will always talk. I need help with the store, and you need steady work. It's a practical arrangement. Ryan considered for a moment, then nodded. All right. When would you like me to start? Is tomorrow too soon? Not at all. I'll collect my things from Mrs. Henley's in the morning." After he left, Olivia sat alone in her apartment, listening to the rain and wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. But as she reviewed the day's events, she realized she felt something she hadn't felt since finding Harold's note. Hope. Spring and Valentine brought renewal to more than just the land. As April turned to May, the store flourished under Olivia and Ryan's combined efforts. With Ryan handling deliveries and maintaining the wagon, Olivia was free to focus on ordering and customer service. She even began offering a small selection of ready-made clothing, which quickly became popular with the miners who had neither wives nor sewing skills. The arrangement wasn't without its challenges. True to Olivia's prediction, Valentine buzzed with speculation. Some, like Mrs. Peterson, made their disapproval evident with pursed lips and meaningful glances. Others, like Edith Henley, defended Olivia's practical solution to running a business alone. "It's no different than when the Wilsons had that ranch hand living above their barn," Edith declared loudly in church one Sunday. "Business needs tending, and a woman alone can't do everything." But most surprising was how quickly Olivia adjusted to Ryan's presence in her life. His quiet competence was a stark contrast to Harold's constant complaints and criticisms. Where Harold had seen only problems, Ryan saw solutions. A broken hinge became an opportunity to reinforce the entire door. A late delivery became a chance to reorganize the storeroom. For his part, Ryan settled into Valentine with ease. His gentle way with horses earned him respect from the local ranchers, and his willingness to lend a hand during emergencies like when the creek flooded in early May made him welcome at the Silver Dollar for evening poker games. Olivia found herself looking forward to their shared meals, when Ryan would recount the day's deliveries or share stories from his years working cattle. His life had taken him across much of the Western Territories, from Texas to Wyoming, and his observations were both insightful and often amusingly dry. "Old Man Wallace fired another hand today," he reported one evening as they ate supper. "That's 3 this month? What happened to this one?" Suggested that maybe the cattle would move faster if Wallace stopped shouting long enough for them to hear the herding calls. Ryan's eyes crinkled with suppressed laughter. "Man wasn't wrong." Olivia smiled, reaching for the bread. "Wallace has been running that ranch the same way for 30 years. I don't think he knows how to speak below a bellow anymore. Some men get set in their ways. Can't imagine anything different might work better." There was something in his tone that made Olivia look up. Ryan was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "Just thinking about how different you are from most folks. Most would have sold the store after what happened, moved back east to family. But you stayed, made it work." Warmth spread through her chest at his words. "I've worked too hard for this place to give it up. And I like Valentine, despite its faults." "It has its charms," Ryan agreed, his gaze still on her face. A sudden awareness prickled along Olivia's skin. The small kitchen felt abruptly intimate, the evening light casting soft shadows across Ryan's features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the warmth in his eyes. She stood quickly, gathering their empty plates. "I should check the order forms for tomorrow's supply wagon." If Ryan noticed her sudden discomfort, he didn't comment. He simply nodded and helped clear the table before bidding her good night and retiring to his room. Alone in her apartment, Olivia pressed her hands to her heated cheeks. What was happening to her? This was a business arrangement. Nothing more. Ryan worked for her. He was kind and competent, yes, but that didn't mean she couldn't even complete the thought. After Harold's betrayal, the idea of trusting another man with her heart seemed impossible. Yet she couldn't deny that something was shifting between her and Ryan, something that both thrilled and terrified her. June arrived with blazing heat and the news that Harold's divorce had been granted. Sheriff Tate delivered the papers himself, along with a letter from the lawyer Olivia's father had hired. "The store is safe," Sheriff Tate explained. "Your partnership agreement held up. Harold gets his initial investment back, but the business remains yours." Relief flooded through her. "Thank goodness. There's more. Your lawyer managed to recover half of the savings Harold took. It's been deposited in the Valentine Bank under your name alone." Olivia sat heavily in the chair behind the counter. "I never thought I'd see any of that money again. Your father hired a good man. The fact that Harold withdrew everything the day before, claiming you abandoned him, didn't look good to the judge." After the sheriff left, Olivia sat quietly, letting the reality sink in. She was officially divorced. The store was hers alone, and she had enough capital to expand if she chose to. When Ryan returned from his deliveries, she shared the news. "That's wonderful," he said, genuine pleasure lighting his features. "You deserve this, Olivia." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I'm thinking of expanding the store, adding a proper millinery section, maybe even fabrics and patterns. The ladies of Valentine would appreciate that. Mrs. Walker at the ranch was just saying she has to order everything from the catalog because the selection here is limited." "Exactly, and with the railroad spur coming through next year, we'll have more families moving in." Ryan leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. "You're building something special here." "We are," Olivia corrected without thinking. "Your deliveries and repairs have given me time to plan all this." Something flashed in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or pleasure. Happy to be part of it. That evening, as they ate supper, Olivia found herself studying Ryan more openly than usual. The past months had changed him subtly. His face was less weathered now that he wasn't constantly in the elements, and he'd traded his trail-worn clothes for neat, if simple, attire. His hair, still a bit too long, caught the lamplight with glints of gold among the darker blonde. "Something on your mind?" Ryan asked, catching her gaze. Olivia flushed, embarrassed at being caught staring. "Just thinking about how much has changed since February. For the better, I hope." "Mostly, yes." She traced the rim of her water glass. "I never expected to be divorced at 24, but I'm finding I don't mind it as much as I thought I would." Ryan set down his fork. "Can I ask you something personal?" Olivia nodded, curious. "Were you happy before everything happened with Harold?" The question caught her off guard. She'd asked herself the same thing many times over the past months, especially as the shock and pain of abandonment began to fade. "I thought I was," she said slowly. "But looking back, I think I was just comfortable. Harold and I married young. He was my parents' choice as much as mine, the son of a successful businessman, respectable, with ambition." She sighed. "We were compatible enough. But there was always something missing." "What?" "Passion, I suppose. Not just physically, though that too, but passion for life, for building something together. Harold saw the store as a stepping stone to bigger things. I saw it as our future." Ryan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "My father used to say a marriage needs 3 things to last: respect, friendship, and enough fire to keep you warm through the cold nights." Wise man. He was. Loved my mother something fierce until the day he died. "What happened to your parents?" Olivia realized she knew little of Ryan's past, beyond the broad strokes he'd shared when first arriving. "Influenza took them both in '67. Farm was already struggling after the war. My sister and her husband took over, made a go of it with those orphans I mentioned." A shadow crossed his face. "Fire took the house 3 years back. Everyone got out safe, thank God. But they lost everything. They're in California now." "I'm sorry." Ryan shrugged, but Olivia could see the grief he carried. "Life happens. We endure." "Yes, we do." Olivia found herself reaching across the table, covering his hand with hers. "But sometimes, if we're lucky, we find people who help make the enduring easier." Ryan's fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. For a long moment, they sat like that, connected, as the evening light faded around them. Later, lying in her bed, Olivia pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering the warmth of Ryan's hand on hers, wondering what it might feel like to be held by him, to be kissed by him. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She was only just finding her footing as an independent woman. Was she ready to risk her heart again? As spring gave way to full summer, Valentine buzzed with preparations for the 4th of July celebration. The town council planned a parade, followed by a picnic and dancing on the newly constructed platform beside the schoolhouse. As the owner of the general store, Olivia was expected to contribute supplies and participate in the planning. "We'll need bunting for the platform," Mrs. Peterson declared during a planning meeting. "Red, white, and blue, of course." "I've ordered extra," Olivia confirmed. "It should arrive on Monday's supply wagon." Excellent. And Mr. Walker will help with the construction of the bandstand? If that's what the council wishes, yes. Olivia had noticed that in recent weeks, Ryan had been increasingly included in community events, no longer viewed as a transient worker, but as a valued member of Valentine. Mrs. Peterson nodded approvingly. He's proven himself quite handy. And reliable. There was an undercurrent to her words that made Olivia glance up sharply. Yes, he's an excellent worker. Just a worker? Mrs. Peterson's eyebrows rose meaningfully. My dear, half the town has noticed the way you look at each other. Heat flooded Olivia's cheeks. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't, Mrs. Peterson patted her hand. But if you did, I'd say it's high time. You're young, he's respectable, and life's too short to waste on propriety when happiness is at stake. Shocked into silence, Olivia could only stare as the older woman gathered her notes and moved on to discuss flower arrangements with Mrs. Henley. Had she been so transparent? And more importantly, was Mrs. Peterson right about Ryan returning her feelings? Olivia had caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her pulse quicken, but he'd never overstepped the boundaries of their working relationship. The week before the celebration, a heat wave settled over Valentine, turning the days into an endless shimmer of dust and sweat. The store became stifling by midday despite the open windows and doors. Customers moved sluggishly. Lingering near the water barrel, Olivia kept filled with cool well water. On the hottest afternoon, with the thermometer pushing past 95 degrees, Ryan returned from delivering supplies to the Wallace Ranch, looking half dead from heat exhaustion. His shirt clung to his back, dark with sweat, and his face was alarmingly red. Inside now, Olivia ordered, abandoning the inventory she'd been taking. You need water and shade before you collapse. For once, Ryan didn't argue. He allowed her to lead him to the back room, where it was marginally cooler. Olivia pumped fresh water into a basin and soaked a cloth. Drink this, she commanded, handing him a cup of water. Slowly. As Ryan sipped the water, Olivia pressed the damp cloth to the back of his neck. He closed his eyes, sighing with relief. Better? She asked after a few minutes. Much. Thank you. Ryan's voice was hoarse. Wallace had us fixing fences in the south pasture. No shade for miles. That man would work horses to death if the law allowed it. Olivia refreshed the cloth and hesitated before pressing it gently to his flushed cheeks. Ryan's eyes opened, meeting hers with startling intensity. This close, she could see flecks of gray in the blue, like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. His hand came up, catching her wrist gently. Olivia. The sound of the store bell jangling broke the moment. Olivia stepped back quickly, her heart hammering against her ribs. I should... Go, Ryan nodded, releasing her wrist. I'll be fine now. But as Olivia hurried to serve the customer, Mrs. Jenkins buying sugar for preserving, she knew something fundamental had shifted between them. The awareness that had been building for months could no longer be ignored. That night, Olivia lay awake despite the heat, replaying the moment in the storeroom. What would have happened if they hadn't been interrupted? What did she want to happen? The answer came with surprising clarity. She wanted Ryan, not just as an employee or a friend, but as a man. She wanted to know if his lips were as gentle as his hands, if the strength she'd observed would translate to how he held her, how he loved her. But fear followed swiftly on the heels of desire. She'd trusted Harold, built a life with him, only to be abandoned when she couldn't provide the one thing he valued above all else. How could she risk that devastation again? Yet, even as she posed the question, she knew Ryan was different. He'd made that clear from their very first conversation. A man who leaves when times get hard isn't much of a man at all. Then he never deserved you. Sleep finally claimed her in the early hours, her dreams filled with Ryan's blue eyes and the phantom touch of his hand on her wrist. The 4th of July dawned clear and marginally cooler to everyone's relief. Olivia rose early to prepare the store's parade display, a wagon decorated with patriotic bunting and filled with barrels of penny candy to throw to the children. Ryan had spent the previous evening attaching flags and streamers to the wagon, transforming the utilitarian vehicle into a festive spectacle. It looks wonderful, Olivia told him, as they made final adjustments before the parade. Wait until you see what else I've added. Ryan grinned, leading her around to the back of the wagon where a small platform had been constructed. For you to stand on during the parade, you'll be able to see everything and throw candy farther. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched her deeply. Thank you. It's perfect. I aim to please, Mrs. Kane. There was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before, a subtle shift from employee to something more. The parade was a joyous affair, with nearly all of Valentine lining Main Street to watch. Olivia rode on her platform, throwing candy to delighted children and waving to their parents. Ryan walked alongside, occasionally handing up more candy and ensuring the horses maintained their steady pace. Afterward, at the community picnic, Olivia found herself swept into conversation after conversation, accepting compliments on the store's display and fielding questions about her new millinery plans. It wasn't until the dancing began that she had a moment to catch her breath. She stood at the edge of the platform, watching as couples formed sets for a lively Virginia reel. The band, comprised of local talent, including the blacksmith on fiddle and the schoolteacher on piano, struck up an energetic tune that had feet tapping and skirts swirling. "May I have this dance?" Ryan stood beside her, hand extended, his expression a mixture of hope and uncertainty. He'd cleaned up for the occasion, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his hair neatly combed back from his face. Olivia hesitated only a moment before placing her hand in his. "Yes, you may." As they joined the line of dancers, Olivia was acutely aware of the glances cast their way. This public acknowledgement of whatever was growing between them would set tongues wagging anew. But as Ryan's hand closed around hers for the first figure of the dance, she found she didn't care. They moved through the patterns of the reel, separating and coming together again, each touch of hands sending sparks along Olivia's skin. Ryan danced with surprising grace for such a tall man, his movements confident and light. When the dance ended, they were both breathless and laughing. "Another?" Ryan asked as the band struck up a waltz. "People will talk," Olivia warned, even as she stepped into his arms. "Let them." Ryan's hand settled at her waist, warm and steady. "I've been wanting to hold you like this for months." The simple honesty of his statement stole her breath more effectively than the dancing had. As they began to move in time to the music, Olivia found the courage to meet his gaze. "How long?" "Since that day in your kitchen, when you told me you were going to fight for your store. Maybe even before that." They turned in a slow circle, the world beyond their shared space fading into a blur of color and sound. "I've been afraid," Olivia admitted quietly. "I know." Ryan's hand tightened slightly at her waist. "I would never hurt you like he did, Olivia, but I understand if you need more time." "It's not just that." Olivia swallowed hard. "I can't give you children, Ryan." The doctor was very clear about that. Ryan's steps never faltered. "I'm not asking for children. I'm asking for a chance to love you." The music swelled around them, but Olivia barely heard it over the pounding of her heart. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes." As the waltz drew to a close, Ryan led her away from the dance platform, toward the quieter area near the creek. The setting sun cast long shadows across the grass, and the distant sounds of the celebration provided a backdrop to their privacy. "I should have said this before asking you to dance," Ryan said, still holding her hand. "I love you, Olivia Kane. I think I started falling for you that first day, when you stood tall despite everything you'd been through. I've watched you rebuild your life with such courage and grace these past months. And I want nothing more than to be part of that life, if you'll have me." Tears pricked at Olivia's eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too. I've been fighting it, telling myself it was too soon, that I couldn't trust my heart again. But the truth is, you've shown me what real partnership looks like, what real respect looks like." Ryan's free hand came up to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, Olivia?" In answer, she rose on her tiptoes, closing the distance between them. His lips were soft against hers, the kiss gentle at first, then deeper as her arms wound around his neck. His hands spanned her waist, drawing her closer until she could feel the solid warmth of him against her. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing unevenly. Ryan rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. "I've imagined that 1,000 times," he murmured. "Reality is much better." Olivia laughed softly. I agree. They walked back to the celebration hand in hand, aware of but unconcerned by the speculative glances that followed them. For the rest of the evening, they remained close, dancing, sharing food from each other's plates, and finally walking home together under a sky brilliant with stars and occasional bursts of fireworks. At her door, Ryan kissed her again, this time with a restrained passion that promised more when the time was right. Good night, Olivia. Good night, Ryan. As she closed the door behind her, Olivia leaned against it, touching her fingers to lips that still tingled from his kiss. For the first time since Harold's betrayal, she felt truly, completely happy. The weeks following the 4th of July celebration were the happiest of Olivia's life. With their feelings in the open, she and Ryan settled into a new rhythm, their working relationship enhanced rather than complicated by their growing romance. During store hours, they maintained a professional distance, though Olivia often caught Ryan watching her with such tenderness that it made her blush. After closing, they would share supper, then sit on the small porch behind the store, talking until the stars emerged. Ryan spoke of his dreams for the future, a small ranch of his own someday, horses rather than cattle, a place where he could put down roots after years of drifting. I'd given up on that dream, he admitted one evening as they sat side by side, shoulders touching. Figured I'd work other men's land until I was too old, then find a boarding house to die in. What changed? Olivia asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Ryan turned to her, moonlight silvering his features. I found something worth saving for, someone worth building a future with. Their courtship progressed with a sweet inevitability that felt both new and somehow ancient, as if they were following a path laid down before them. Ryan brought her wildflowers gathered during his deliveries. Olivia mended his shirts with tiny, careful stitches, small gestures that spoke volumes about their growing devotion. By August, when Ryan formally asked for her hand in marriage, it felt less like a new beginning and more like the natural continuation of what they had already built together. I know it hasn't been long, he said, as they stood by the creek where they'd shared their first kiss. And I know some might say it's too soon after your divorce, but I can't imagine my life without you, Olivia. The simple gold band he offered wasn't fancy. Ryan had saved for it from his wages, refusing to let Olivia pay him after they began courting. But to Olivia, it was more precious than the most elaborate diamond. Yes, she said, holding out her trembling hand. 1,000 times, yes. They were married on a perfect September day, with the aspen trees just beginning to turn gold in the mountains. The ceremony was small but joyful, held in Valentine's white clapboard church, with most of the town in attendance. Mrs. Peterson, who had appointed herself unofficial matchmaker after the 4th of July, beamed from the front pew. Sheriff Tate gave the bride away in place of her father, who couldn't travel from Ohio due to poor health, but sent a generous wedding gift and his heartfelt blessing. Olivia wore a new dress of pale blue silk, ordered specially from Denver, with tiny pearl buttons down the back that Ryan would later undo with reverent fingers. He wore a new suit that made him look both dignified and slightly uncomfortable, until the moment Olivia appeared at the church door. Then his face transformed with such naked adoration that several ladies dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The reception was held at the Silver Dollar, where Edith Henley had outdone herself with decorations and a feast that would be talked about for months. There was dancing and toasting and much good-natured teasing, especially when Ryan swept Olivia into a waltz far more intimate than was strictly proper for a public gathering. As evening fell, they slipped away to the apartment above the store, their home now truly shared. Ryan carried Olivia across the threshold, setting her down gently in the kitchen that had witnessed the beginning of their love story months before. "Mrs. Walker," he murmured, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "Do you have any idea how happy you've made me? If it's half as happy as you've made me, then yes," Olivia whispered back, rising on her toes to kiss him. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time. Ryan's hands and lips traced every curve and hollow of her body, his touch healing wounds left by years of feeling inadequate, broken. When they finally joined, Olivia wept with the perfect rightness of it, and Ryan kissed away her tears before finding his own release. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head pillowed on his chest, Olivia traced patterns on his skin. "I never knew it could be like this. Ryan's fingers combed gently through her unbound hair. Like what? So, complete, as if we're truly one person. He kissed the top of her head. That's how it should be between a husband and wife, a true partnership in all things. As they drifted towards sleep, Olivia thought about the journey that had brought them together. Harold's cruelty had broken her heart, but had also freed her to find a love far deeper and truer than she had ever imagined possible. Life in Valentine took on a new richness as autumn deepened. The store thrived under Olivia and Ryan's joint management, with the promised millinery section opening to great success in October. Ryan continued his deliveries but also began working with the blacksmith to learn more about wagon repair, expanding his skills and their business offerings. They settled into married life with a contentment that surprised even Olivia, who had once believed such happiness was beyond her reach. Each morning brought the simple joy of waking beside Ryan, of sharing coffee and plans for the day. Each evening brought the pleasure of shared meals and shared confidences, followed by nights of increasing passion and intimacy. If there was a shadow on their happiness, it was only that Olivia still carried the grief of knowing she could not give Ryan children. Though he never mentioned it, never even hinted at disappointment, she sometimes caught him watching the town's children with a wistfulness that tore at her heart. One evening in late November, as the first snow dusted Valentine's streets, Olivia finally found the courage to broach the subject. "Ryan," she began as they sat before the fire after supper, "I've been thinking about something you told me once, about your sister and her husband taking in orphans after the war." Ryan looked up from the bridle he was mending. "What about it? Would you consider doing something similar? There are so many children who need homes, especially with the mining accidents and the hard winters." Ryan set aside his work, giving her his full attention. "Are you asking if I'd want to adopt children with you?" "Yes." Olivia twisted her hands in her lap. "I know it's not the same as having your own, Olivia." Ryan moved to kneel before her chair, taking her restless hands in his. "Any child we raise together would be our own, in all the ways that matter. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does." Tears sprang to her eyes. "You're not disappointed? That I can't give you sons of your own blood?" "Never." The fierceness in his voice left no room for doubt. "The only thing that would disappoint me is if you believed even for a moment that I married you with any reservations or conditions." He raised her hands to his lips, kissing them gently. "You are more than enough for me, exactly as you are." Olivia slid from her chair into his arms, burying her face against his shoulder. "I love you so much. And I love you." Ryan held her tightly. "But for what it's worth, I think you'd be a wonderful mother. And if there are children out there who need us, I can't think of anything I'd rather do than raise them with you." They spoke with Reverend Collins the next day about their desire to adopt. The minister, who corresponded regularly with orphanages in Denver and St. Louis, promised to make inquiries. With the railroad expanding westward, bringing more settlers and more orphan children, the need for good homes was ever present. "It may take some time," the Reverend cautioned, "but I believe God will bring the right children to you when the moment is right." The moment came sooner than any of them expected. Just 2 weeks before Christmas, a telegram arrived from Denver. A young woman, unmarried and desperately poor, was seeking a home for her expected child. The baby would be born in January, and the mother, barely 18 herself, wanted a better life for her child than she could provide. "She's asking specifically for a family that cannot have children of their own," Reverend Collins explained, as Olivia and Ryan sat in his study reading the telegram. "She believes such a family would cherish her baby most." "She's right," Olivia whispered, her heart racing with hope and fear. "But will she accept us? We haven't been married long, and—" "She asks only that the child be raised with love and faith," the Reverend interrupted gently. "I have told her of your circumstances, your stable business, and your deep commitment to each other. She wishes to meet you if you are willing to travel to Denver after Christmas." Ryan reached for Olivia's hand, his own trembling slightly. "We're willing." The journey to Denver in early January was bitterly cold, but filled with anticipation. They stayed at a modest hotel near the charity hospital, where the young mother, Mary, was awaiting her time. Their first meeting was awkward but deeply moving. Mary was little more than a child herself, with haunted eyes and hands that constantly worried the edge of her shawl. But when she spoke of her unborn baby, her face transformed with a fierce, protective love. "I want to know," she said directly to Olivia, "why you would raise another woman's child as your own." Olivia took a deep breath. "Because every child deserves to be loved, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. And because I believe family is made through love and choice, not just blood." Mary studied her face, then Ryan's. "The Reverend said you can't have children of your own." "That's right," Ryan confirmed. "But we have love to give, a stable home, and the means to provide a good life." "And you won't ever tell the baby they weren't wanted?" Olivia reached across the small table between them, taking Mary's cold hand. "Your baby is wanted. By you enough to seek the best possible future, and by us enough to travel across mountains in winter to meet you. We would tell our child that their first mother loved them so much. She made the bravest, most selfless choice a mother can make." Tears spilled down Mary's pale cheeks. "I do love this baby. That's why I can't keep them. I have nothing, no husband, no family who will help, no way to provide." "Then let us help," Ryan said gently. "Let us give your child the life you wish for them." 3 days later, Mary went into labor. The hospital staff allowed Olivia to sit with her through the long, difficult hours, holding her hand and wiping her brow as the young woman fought to bring new life into the world. Shortly before dawn, a tiny boy was born, his lusty cries filling the sterile room with promise. The nurse cleaned and swaddled him before placing him in his mother's arms. Mary wept as she counted his fingers and toes, as she traced the perfect shell of his ear and the delicate arch of his eyebrows. Then, with a courage that humbled Olivia to witness, she kissed his forehead and held him out. "His name is Daniel," she whispered, "after my father. He was a good man, the only one I ever knew. I hope your husband is a good man too." "The best," Olivia promised, tears streaming down her face as she accepted the precious bundle. "He will love Daniel as his own son, just as I will." "Tell him," Mary's voice broke, "tell him someday that I loved him too much to keep him." The adoption papers were signed that afternoon, with Reverend Collins serving as witness. The next day, Olivia and Ryan began the journey back to Valentine, traveling slowly and carefully with their newborn son bundled against the winter cold. As they crossed into Montana territory, a snowstorm forced them to take shelter at a way station for 3 days. Those days, though cramped and cold, became some of Olivia's most cherished memories, her first real experience of being a family with Ryan and Daniel. She watched in wonder as Ryan cradled their son, his large hands impossibly gentle as he changed swaddling cloths and soothed midnight cries. She felt her heart expand with each tiny yawn, each perfect stretch of Daniel's miniature fingers. "He has your eyes," Ryan told her as they sat beside the station's fireplace, Daniel sleeping peacefully in Olivia's arms. "That's not possible," she laughed softly. "He's not related to either of us." "Doesn't matter. They're the same, seeing everything, missing nothing." Ryan's finger traced their son's cheek. "I think Mary chose us for a reason, beyond just wanting a stable home. I think she saw herself in you that same strength, that same capacity for love. I hope we can live up to her trust," Olivia whispered. "I hope we can be the parents he deserves." "We will," Ryan promised. Together. Valentine welcomed the new Walker family with open arms and practical assistance. Mrs. Peterson organized a belated shower, ensuring Daniel had everything from diapers to a hand-carved cradle made by the blacksmith. Edith Henley brought meals for the first week home, declaring that new mothers needed rest, regardless of how the baby came to them. The store was temporarily reorganized to accommodate a small bassinet behind the counter, allowing Olivia to tend to both business and baby. Ryan took over more of the counter work, freeing Olivia for feedings and changings, and expanded their delivery service to compensate for any lost revenue during their adjustment period. By the time spring returned to Valentine, the Walkers had settled into their new normal. Daniel thrived, growing from a solemn newborn to a smiling, curious infant who delighted in the attention of the entire town. Customers often lingered longer than necessary, hoping for a glimpse of his toothless grin or a chance to tickle his chubby feet. On the anniversary of Harold's abandonment, Olivia found herself standing in the cemetery at the edge of town. She hadn't planned the visit, her steps had simply led her there, as she walked with Daniel nestled against her chest in a sling. She stood for a long time before the 3 tiny graves that marked her lost babies, feeling not the crushing grief of before, but a gentle, bittersweet ache. "I want you to know," she whispered to the silent stones, "that you are not forgotten, and that your brother Daniel is loved, partly because of you, because losing you taught me the true value of a child's life." As she turned to leave, she saw Ryan waiting at the cemetery gate, respectfully giving her privacy, but close enough that she knew he was there if needed. Her heart swelled with love for this man who understood her so completely, who supported her through both joy and sorrow. "Thank you for waiting," she said as she reached him. Ryan's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her and Daniel close against his side. "Always." They walked home together through the greening fields, Daniel babbling happily and reaching for the wildflowers that dotted the path. Valentine lay before them, the afternoon sun gilding its humble buildings with promise. "I've been thinking," Ryan said as they neared town, "with the store doing so well and Daniel growing so fast, maybe it's time to consider that ranch I've always dreamed of." Olivia looked up at him, surprised. "You still want that?" "More than ever. Nothing fancy or too large, just enough land for some horses, a garden for you, room for Daniel to run and play, maybe even room for more children someday, if another Mary comes along needing our help." The vision he painted was so vivid, so beautiful, that Olivia could almost see it. A small house with a wide porch, horses grazing in green pastures, children's laughter on the breeze. "We could keep the store too," she suggested. "Hire a manager for day-to-day operations. I've been training Sarah Jenkins, and she's quite capable." Ryan grinned. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've already spoken with Mr. Wallace about a parcel of land he's willing to sell. 200 acres with creek access and good grazing, about 3 miles outside town. Close enough to check on the store regularly, but far enough for real peace and quiet. You've been planning this for a while, haven't you? Since Daniel came into our lives. I want him to have space to grow, to learn about animals and nature." Ryan's expression grew serious. "But only if it's what you want too. Your happiness comes first, Olivia." She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "My happiness is with you and Daniel, wherever we make our home. But yes, I think I would like that very much, a ranch of our own, a new adventure for our family." Ryan's kiss was brief but full of promise, mindful of the baby between them and the public road. "I love you, Mrs. Walker. And I love you, Mr. Walker." As they continued toward town, Olivia reflected on the strange winding path that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. Harold's cruel abandonment, which had once seemed like the end of all her hopes, had actually been the beginning of a far greater love story than she could have imagined. The following spring, just as Daniel was taking his first unsteady steps, the Walker family moved into their new home. The ranch house was modest but well built, with wide windows to catch the mountain light and the promised porch where Olivia could sit and watch the sunset while Daniel played at her feet. Ryan named their first horses Freedom and Hope, appropriate symbols for the life they were building together. The small herd grew steadily, as did Ryan's reputation for fair dealing and excellent horsemanship. By Daniel's 2nd birthday, Walker horses were sought after throughout the territory. The store in Valentine continued to prosper under Sarah Jenkins' day-to-day management, with Olivia overseeing the accounts and making major decisions. The arrangement allowed her to balance her business interests with her role as Daniel's mother, a balance she had once thought impossible. In the fall of 1881, Reverend Collins brought news of another child in need, a 4-year-old girl whose parents had both died of typhoid in Billings. Unlike with Daniel, this adoption process was more complex, requiring appearances before a judge and formal evaluations of the Walker home and means. Throughout it all, Ryan remained Olivia's steadfast partner, never wavering in his commitment to expanding their family. When little Emma finally joined them just before Christmas, it was Ryan who spent hours building her trust, patiently sitting nearby as she gradually emerged from her shell of grief and fear. Watching her husband teach their daughter to ride her first pony, Olivia felt a gratitude so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This man, who had entered her life when she was at her lowest, had helped her build something beautiful from the ashes of her first marriage. One evening, after the children were asleep, Ryan found Olivia standing on the porch, gazing up at the vast Montana sky ablaze with stars. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Olivia leaned into his embrace, savoring the solid strength of him. "I was thinking about something you said to me that first week you were in Valentine. Do you remember?" "I said a lot of things that week. Was trying to impress the pretty store owner." She smiled, turning in his arms to face him. "You said, 'Then he never deserved you.'" Ryan's expression softened with memory. "Ah, that. You were right. Harold never did deserve me, not because I'm so special, but because he couldn't see beyond his own desires to what we might have built together." "His loss," Ryan murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "My immeasurable gain." "Do you ever regret it?" Olivia asked, the old insecurity briefly surfacing. "Taking on a woman who couldn't bear your children?" Ryan's hands framed her face, his gaze intensely serious. "Olivia Walker, not a single day has passed when I haven't thanked God for bringing me to Valentine, for giving me the courage to speak to you that evening, for leading us to this life together." His thumbs gently wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Daniel and Emma may not have come from your body, but they came through your heart, which makes them as much yours as if you had carried them." "And yours," she whispered. "And mine." He kissed her then, deeply and thoroughly, the passion between them undiminished by years of marriage. "Now come to bed, wife. Tomorrow's roundup starts early." As they walked hand in hand into the house they had built together, Olivia reflected that life rarely follows the path we expect. Sometimes it's the detours, the painful, unexpected turns that lead us to our greatest joys. Harold's abandonment had once seemed like the end of her world. Instead, it had been the first step toward finding Ryan, toward creating this family that was bound not by blood, but by choice and love, toward building a life richer and more fulfilling than she had ever dreamed possible. In the darkness of their bedroom, as Ryan's hands and lips reaffirmed the depth of his love for her, Olivia gave silent thanks for the broken road that had led her home.